Hi there, and welcome back to an Apple Motion episode of Apple a Day. I'm your host, John Martins. Today, I'm going to show you how to make this 3D slideshow template in Apple Motion. You'll be able to use this template in Final Cut Pro and drop in your own images or video into each slide. So let's get to it. We're going to start out with a blank document in Motion. It's 1920 by 1080 and it's 60 seconds. The first thing I'm going to do is add a camera by clicking on Add Object at the top and choosing Camera. Then we're going to start creating drop zones which can accept an image or video when placed into Final Cut Pro. So I'm going to select the group that's already there and I'm going to rename it to Photo 1. And with that group still selected, I'm going to click on Add Object again, but this time I'm going to choose Drop Zone and I'm going to rename it to Drop Zone 1. Next, I want to add a border to this drop zone. A quick way of doing that is to just draw a rectangle behind the drop zone, leaving a little bit exposed all the way around to create a border. Now, in order to see what we're doing more clearly, I want to move the camera back in 3D space so I can see the edge of the drop zone. So I'm going to select the camera and then go to the inspector and under Properties. Now, right now it only shows X and Y, but we need to adjust the Z parameter. So I'm going to click on the disclosure triangle next to position, and that will show me all three, X, Y, and Z. So I'm just going to click on the Z axis, and I'm going to type in 1000 to move the camera back 1000 pixels, and that will allow us to see the entire drop zone area, so it's going to make it easier for us to draw our rectangle. So with Photo 1 selected, I'm going to go and choose the Rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click on the top left area and drag down to the bottom right. We need to make sure this is centered correctly. So under Position, I'm going to click on the far right drop-down arrow and choose Reset Parameter. And that changes the XYZ back to 000. And as you can see, it's still a little bit too small. So I'm going to click on the bottom left handle and drag it out. So it's just past the edge. And I'm going to do the same thing in the top right handle. And again, I'm going to reset the position to be 000 so that it's perfectly centered. I'm also going to move that rectangle behind the drop zone. It looks like the top and bottom of the rectangle needs to be a little bit thicker. So I'm just going to open that up a tiny bit. And then one more time, reset it so it's centered. That looks pretty good. If for some reason your rectangle is still not behind your drop zone, you can just select it and put in -1 in the Z axis. And that will definitely put the rectangle behind the drop zone because the rectangle has a value of -1 and the drop zone has a value of 0. So the drop zone and the border are set at 000 and 00 -1, and that's where they're going to stay. Remember that these positions are relative to the group. So it's the group that will be moving, not the contents inside. So let's select the Photo 1 group and we're going to duplicate it by right-clicking on it and choosing Duplicate. And we're going to rename this to Photo 2. And then we're going to duplicate it 8 more times, renaming them Photo 3 all the way through to Photo 10. I'm just going to close these photo groups so they don't take up too much space. And again, duplicate. Okay, so that's done. Now in a real slideshow, you're probably going to want to have more than 10 photos. Also, it looks better because you're going to see more items in the background. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we're just going to limit it to 10. Now next, we want to space these out in the Z-axis to give the slideshow some depth. So I'm going to space them out away from the camera with 2500 pixels between each photo. Now Photo 1, if I select that, I'm just going to go to Properties and look at Position. It's already at 0. And that's good. We're just going to leave that there. That's the starting point. So Photo 2, we're going to move back 2500. So I'm going to double click on the Z axis and type in -2500. And then Photo 3, -5000. And Photo 4, -7500. And Photo 5, -10,000. Photo 6, -12,500. Photo 7, -15,000. Photo 8, -17,500. Photo 9, -20,000. And Photo 10, -22,500. So to get a sense of how these are spaced out, we can select this red icon here. So it's going to show me this in 3D. from the right edge. So this green line represents the 0 position, which is where the first photo is at. And you can see that all of the photo groups are spaced out evenly with a distribution of 2500 pixels between each one. So I'm going to switch this back to the active camera. So the next thing that we want to do is to space these photo groups out so they seem a little bit more random and pleasing to the eye as well. So in order to do this, we need to see the whole workspace. So I'm going to move the camera back to about 9,000. Actually, I'll type in 9,000. So then I'm going to select photo 2 and I'm going to move it to the bottom left by clicking on the X and dragging to the left. And then the same thing with Y, clicking on that and dragging to the left also. So now what's interesting is we don't see the drop zone. We only see the outline of the group because it's selected. If we deselect it, you don't see the outline anymore. But before I continue, let's take a moment to quickly rename all of these drop zones. Now the first one is good. It's drop zone 1. So in photo 2, it should be drop zone 2. And photo 3, drop zone 3, etc. So now they're all updated, so the drop zone names match the photo group names. So back to photo 2, and the big question is, why can't we see that drop zone? Well, the answer lies in the camera properties. So select the camera, and then under the inspector, choose camera. So the problem is the far plane. It's set to 10,000 pixels. So that means that at 10,000 pixels away from the camera, we won't be able to see items past that. Now the camera, if you recall, is set to 9,000 and drop zone 2 was minus 2,500. So that's 9,000 plus 2,500. That's, 11,500, which is further than 10,000. That's why we can't see it. So what we want to do, let's set that to 30,000, which is beyond the furthest item that we created if the camera is at 0. So this is seeing up to 30,000 pixels away in the Z-axis. And the furthest item out is 22,500. Now while we're here, we want to set the far fade value to be 5,000. So that way anything that's moving towards the camera isn't just going to blink on, it's going to fade in over the course of 5,000 pixels. We also want to use depth of field so that the objects or the photos that are further away from the camera will become blurry and out of focus. This way the images that are in the background won't be clearly visible, and we want the viewers to be looking at the photo that's closest to the camera. So click on the Show button for the depth of field, and let's set the blur amount to 50, and the far focus to 10,000. So what that means is, as items become 10,000 pixels away from the camera, they will become blurry and out of focus. We also want to change the filter type to defocus rather than just a Gaussian blur. That'll give us a slightly more pleasing result, simulating how a real camera would be out of focus. Note that the defocus option does take a little bit longer to render. Now, in order to see the depth of field in the preview mode, we need to go over to render on the top right and turn on depth of field. And you can see that this drop zone now is a little bit blurry because the camera is at position 9,000 and that's at minus 2,500, which is more than 10,000 pixels. So everything after 10,000 becomes blurry because the far focus again is set to 10,000. So let's start moving the other photo groups into position. Let's select photo 3 and properties, and we're going to move that up and to the right, but not as far into the corner as the one on the bottom left because we don't want, perfect symmetry. We're going to take photo 4 and move it straight down and a little bit to the right. Say right about there is good, maybe up a little higher. And photo 5, we're going to move this all the way up to the top, maybe just off screen a little bit, and to the left. And photo 6 will move to the bottom right corner. And I'm moving these simply by clicking on the position and dragging to the left or to the right. And photo 7 will move to the left and up. And notice how these are getting more progressively blurry the further back they get. So number 8, we're going to move up and to the right. And number 9, we're going to move all the way to the right. And down a little bit. And the last one, 10, we're going to move to the left and down. Right to the bottom of the screen. I think I'm going to move drop zone 8 a little bit over to the left. Not quite happy with that one. Maybe like that. And drop zone 4 a little bit further to the right. And down a bit. Now note that photo 10, I can't see it because it's beyond the range of the camera. Because the camera's at 9,000, this is 22,500 pixels away, and that is beyond the 30,000 pixel limit that we gave it in the far plane of the camera. Now the camera will be moving inward on the z-axis as it goes from photo to photo, so the drop zone for photo 10 will come into view. Okay, so that's it for placement, but of course there's no movement yet. If I press play, obviously nothing's happening. I'm going to put that back to the beginning. So now it's time to add some animation. We're going to use a built-in camera motion to move from photo to photo. So with the playhead back at the beginning, I'm going to go and select camera. And then I'm going to click on behaviors, go down to camera, and I'm going to add in framing. This behavior will animate the camera as it moves from one photo to the next. Now I already determined ahead of time that a 4-second duration works pretty good. However, I only want the first animation to be 3 seconds since we're not moving from one photo to another. It's just, this is the initial animation. So I'm going to move the playhead to 3 seconds. And with framing selected, I'm just going to type in the letter O for out point, and that will cut it right there. So it forces that framing behavior to only be 3 seconds long. I'm also going to rename framing to framing 1 because we want it to be associated to photo 1. Then with framing 1 still selected, I'm going to click and drag photo 1 into the target area. Now there's a few other settings that we need to change. First, we want the movement to be a little smoother than what it is out of the box. And we're going to change the transition from constant to ease both. It's going to smooth out the beginning and the ending of the animation. So if we play this back, it still seems a little abrupt. And notice that the playhead, even though I'm not at the end of the framing, it's already in its final position. About the halfway mark is where it reaches its destination. So why is that? Well, that's because the position transition option is set to 50%. We don't want it to reach its final destination completely until the full 3 seconds. So I'm going to drag this over to 100%. And now if I play that, that's a lot smoother. It's a little bit slow, so you'd probably be okay to change the duration of this framing behavior to maybe 2 seconds, but we're just going to leave it at 3. The other thing is I don't want to see the white border of the photo when it's filling the screen. So we need to adjust the Z value of the framing offset to make it a little bit closer to the camera so that that white border can't be seen. So if I click on framing offset in the Z option, so we're going to adjust that Z value until that white border is off screen. Now notice drop zone 10 down here. When I play this, watch it come into view. See how it fades in? That's because the camera has that 5,000 far fade. If we put that to 0, watch it again. It'll just wink into existence. Right? Which doesn't look very nice. We want it to slowly fade in. So we'll put that back to 5,000. So now that framing 1 is working pretty good, we're happy with that. Let's duplicate that. And we're going to call it framing 2. And then I'm going to go down to the timeline and select it and hit the plus key and the number 5 and the decimal point. And when I hit return, that's going to move that forward by 5 seconds. I also want the duration of this to be 4 seconds. So I'm just going to move my playhead to 9. So now it's 4 seconds long. And with framing 2 selected, drag photo 2 into the target area. And if we go back and play this, I have this weird angle happening and it's not very pleasing to the eye. And that's because of the orientation property. So I'm going to change this from orient to current to orient to the final position. And that way, that will keep the angle of these drop zones facing the camera. Now, the only issue is that the transition from photo 1 to photo 2 is happening in a straight line. It would be nice if the camera would kind of move out and then back in. Luckily, this behavior has that option. So in framing 2, go to Path Offset and click on the disclosure triangle. And then in the Z property, type in 5,000. So with that option, it'll move the camera out by 5,000 pixels before it moves back into its final destination. So I'm going to play this again. That's exactly what we want. So now let's duplicate framing 2. I'm going to select it and right click and select duplicate. I'm going to rename it to framing 3. And then I'm going to drag photo 3 into the target area. Also, we need to move it out. Now I need to move it forward by 6 seconds this time. So with it selected in the timeline, framing 3 is selected, I'm going to press +6 period. Now if I don't type in the period, it'll just move it forward 6 frames. So by typing in that period, it knows we mean 6 seconds. Hit return, and there we have it. It's moved ahead 6 seconds. I'm going to duplicate it again. Call it framing 4. Drag in photo 4 into it. And click on it down here and move it ahead 6 seconds again. So you can see where we're going with this. So I'm going to duplicate this 6 more times and apply photo 5 through photo 10 to the new framing behaviors that I'm creating. Okay, so that's done. So now if we play this back, we have nice smooth movement, but it feels like the motion just stops between the camera movements. So as it goes from photo to photo, that's a nice smooth transition, but then it just stops until, and then it waits a few seconds, then it moves again, and so on and so on. It would be kind of nice if the camera still felt like it was moving, like there was some kind of animation happening. Now it's kind of tough to actually apply a global movement to the camera, which could interfere with the behaviors that we just added. But what we can do is move the photos slightly. And a quick way to do that is to take all of the photo groups that we've made, photo 1 through photo 10, select them all and group them together. So I'm going to do that right now. Photo 1 to photo 10. I'm going to right click and select group. And I'm just going to rename that group to photos. And then with photo selected, I'm going to go to behaviors, basic motion, and add throw. And I'm going to give it a throw velocity in the z-axis of 75. So now what's happening, and I'll just replay it. You can still see, if you look at that arrow, it is still moving towards the camera a little bit. Now, because I've got this throw on there, plus I'm rendering, the depth of field, it's moving a little bit slower. But you get the idea. Watch the arrow again when it fills the screen. It still moves towards the camera, ever so slightly. You can, of course, adjust that throw velocity to be either slower or faster, whatever is pleasing to you, but 75 for the purposes of this tutorial works pretty good. Okay, so we're almost done, but before we save this as a template, we need to publish the drop zones so that they're visible in Final Cut Pro. So if you go down to photo 1 and open that up and click on drop zone, and if you click on the drop down arrow, and you'll see that the option is to unpublish. So that means that it's already published, and that's true. When you create a new drop zone in Motion, it automatically publishes that to be available in Final Cut Pro. Unfortunately, it doesn't carry over when you duplicate it. So if we go to drop zone 2 and click on the drop down arrow, it says publish. That means it's not been published yet, so we need to select it for every single remaining drop zone. So I'm just going to quickly do this in photo 3 now. Publish. All right, so that is done. So now let's publish this to Final Cut Pro and test it out. So we're going to go under the File menu in Motion and select Publish Template and choose Publish as Final Cut Generator. And I'm also going to save a preview movie. And I have a category already created called Apple a Day. You can put it in any existing category you like, or you can select a new category and create a new one just for yourself. But I'll leave mine set to Apple a Day, and I'm going to call this 3D Slideshow. And choose Publish. And that's done. So I've already got Final Cut Pro open, so I'm going to switch over to that. And I've got a blank project called Slideshow. So I'm going to click on Titles and Generators. And in Apple a Day, I'm going to choose 3D Slideshow. There it is. Because we chose Save Preview Movie, when I scrub through that thumbnail, you can see the entire thing being played out. But I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to drag this down to my project timeline. And selecting it in the timeline, I can see my 10 drop zones. So I'm going to switch back to the project library, and I've already got some images in here. So with the 3D Slideshow selected in my timeline, I'm going to go up to the images that I already dragged into my project, and I'm going to drag them over into each drop zone. All right, so I've got all my photos dragged into the drop zones, and let's play this and see how it looks. This looks pretty good, and you can see that the depth of field effect is working like it should. And you can also see that the images slowly zoom in even when the camera is not moving, just to give it a little bit more of a dynamic feel. It doesn't seem like everything stops when the camera zooms in. And like I said before, if you had more than 10 images on here, this would be a little more spectacular because you'd see a lot more images in the background. You could set up a template that has like 30 images on there. One other thing that I just thought of is you could go back to the Motion project and publish the X and Y positions of each photo group. This would allow further customization in Final Cut Pro, and you can make positional changes to these photos. Well, that's it for today. I hope this was helpful. I'm John Martins. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode of Apple a Day.